What's going on, Roob?
You know, the Eagle Eye podcast, it never rests. I mean, year round, we're doing 2 podcasts every week, January through December, Super Bowl, whatever it is, off season, we're doing podcasts. During the season, three per week, one after the game. But it's really quite a thing. Like TV shows do like 13 weeks, or they have a season, you know. Movies only play for a few months in the theater, and then they go to Netflix or whatever. We don't take breaks. We're not seasonal. Like you're only getting your grass cut like from spring through the late fall. We're not like that. We're not like getting your grass cut. That's our new motto.
Any other things you want? Any other metaphors?
No.
Good. This is the Eagle Eye podcast, which does not rest, as Reuben mentioned. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. We do have a lot to talk about. I'll be heading out to the Combine in just a few days, so it's crazy that we're already here. But yeah, it's almost free agency, almost draft time. We have a lot to get into today.
We do, and I kind of miss going to the Combine. I always enjoyed it, mainly the stuff kind of off the beaten path that just run into guys on the street, run into Joe Banner in the mall there across from the stadium. But yeah, it's kind of the first. I mean, I guess the Senior Bowl, but it's really the first kind of thing leading up to the draft that really gets you going in the offseason.
Yeah, so we'll go through some Combine preview in a little bit, at least from the Eagles' perspective. But Rube, you wrote a piece this week, and if Howie Roseman's listening, which we know you are, hey Howie, good to see you. Hope you're doing well. All you have to do this offseason is read what Rube wrote, and you'll be in good shape.
It's not going to happen.
That he's listening or that he's going to follow?
Either.
Okay.
Well, some of these things he really has to do, but not because I suggested them. But yeah, and I came up with a bunch, and I was gonna rank them in order of importance, but then I thought, you know what? They're really all important, so I didn't rank them. I just kind of did them randomly, and I started with Devontae. And there's a bunch of guys that are important to re-sign. I mean, Landon, obviously Reddick, who's kind of in a different situation because he's older. But Devontae, to me, in a way, is priority number one, just because he is such a huge part of what they do. And I still think there's more there. I think, and we've talked about this, I think he can be a Pro Bowl type guy, and it might make the negotiation a little tricky because he's not a top 10 receiver statistically. He's barely in the top 20 statistically, but I think the eye test says there's more there. It's hard to imagine. I mean, he's done what he's been asked to do. He catches the ball when it comes his way, and he makes plays. So I think Kellen Moore should be good for him. And I think he's got like a 1,300-yard season in him. It might make the negotiation a little tricky just because his value is probably a little higher than his stats. But to me, as big a priority as there is getting this kid signed.
Yeah, so we've talked about it before, but in case you're listening and you missed that, Devontae Smith is entering the final year of his rookie contract. There is a 5th-year option that the Eagles will obviously exercise before May 2nd. That's kind of a formality for a player as good as him. So he's under team control for 2 more seasons. So like, it's not like he has crazy leverage right now, but the Eagles typically like to get these deals done before they need to.
Yeah, and I think when you do that, it's never good for the relationship. I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's look, a guy like Devontae wants a long-term deal. He doesn't want to play on that 5th-year option. Certainly, he probably doesn't want to play on the 4th year. So he deserves it, and it's the kind of deal that Howie usually gets done.
Yeah, and you mentioned some other players there, like Landon Dickerson's another obvious one. He was the 2nd-round pick that year. But also Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick both up. And Jake Elliott is another one who, deserves it. I would imagine they get that done.
Yeah, hard to imagine getting into a big contract dispute with Jake Elliott. Although, I mean, kickers are starting to make pretty good money, and he's as good as anybody. So that'll be interesting. He's going to end up being probably when he signs, he'll be the highest paid kicker in history. And then like 2 weeks later, someone else will sign to be higher paid. But my next one was Reddick and Sweat, and we've talked about this. It could be one or the other. I think there's a chance it could be one or the other. They're both up after 2024. Obviously, Reddick is neither one is on their first contract, so their value is going to be interesting because Sweat's younger. Reddick's more productive, but they're both really good players. Eagles can't really afford to lose any pass rush, but I don't know if they can keep both these guys.
Yeah, and we've talked about Nolan Smith before, and that's why it kind of stings that he didn't have an encouraging rookie season, because if he did, then you're going, well, even if you lose one of them, maybe that Nolan Smith is ready to step up and be that guy, and we didn't see enough.
Yeah, and they're telling us, how high they are on Nolan Smith, but I mean, he's a first-round pick who had a sack and has a shoulder problem, so it's concerning, and really curious to see where it goes with Nolan. I mean, yeah, if he had like 6 sacks and really showed some promise, you'd probably feel comfortable having him in, projecting him as a starter next year, but certainly not after the way he played. Number 3 is cutting ties with that whole group of veteran defensive players. And I threw some offensive guys in there, but mainly defensive players. Many came in during the season, during training camp. I just think they kind of represent all that went wrong with last year. They were just guys on 1-year deals, guys just passing through. Most of them, just looking for that next paycheck. In some cases, that last paycheck. When a guy gets into that age range, and these guys are all in their 30s, but they're all kind of on the downswing of their careers. And I think when you have a bunch of guys like that, it's just not good for chemistry, for culture, for production. If you have guys that are just passing through on 1-year deals, they know they're going to be somewhere else next year if they're anywhere. Those guys they don't have that buy-in that guys who are on long-term deals or draft picks have. And I mean, I mentioned Nicholas Morrow, Shaq Leonard, Zach Cunningham, OZ, Rashad Penny, Justin Evans, Bradley Roby, Julio Jones. Kevin Byard technically isn't a free agent, but he kind of is because they're going to cut him or restructure him if they decide to keep him. But I just think that whole group's got to go. And it's hard to do because, I mean, these guys are all pros. They've all had really good years at some point in their career, not that long ago for most of them. But I just think if you start running it back with, we can get by with Nicholas Morrow, we can get by with Zach Cunningham, we don't have to really fix that position. I think you're making a mistake.
Yeah, and it's tricky because you understand why they went the 1-year deal route.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works too. Like we saw, obviously in 17, it worked. In 22, it was during the year, but I think it's fair to say Sue and Linval Joseph worked.
Yeah.
So like, it's not like all these deals are doomed to fail, but it is tricky to find the right guys who still have something left.
And those guys in 17, they were all in camp. They were all with the team in OTAs, I think, pretty much all the 1-year guys. Not that makes a huge difference, but there was more of a kind of passing through this year feeling. If you had to keep one of those guys that we just mentioned, and look, I think you keep 1 or 2 of them maybe as backups, but you just can't run it back with that whole group.
That group you mentioned. So give me some names, just so I know where my
Morrow, Shaq Leonard, Zach Cunningham, OZ, Rashad Penny, Justin Evans, Bradley Roby, Kevin Byard, Julio Jones. Probably forgetting a couple.
Okay. Out of that group, it would be Zach Cunningham. He was serviceable.
Yeah.
If you bring in, I wouldn't be okay with them running it back with Zach Cunningham and Nakobe Dean, but I think Cunningham was okay.
I think if he has a really good guy next to him, you can get by with him. They certainly had worse linebackers, and gosh, they went to a Super Bowl with Keith Adams starting. But I think the Nakobe Zach Cunningham combo is probably the most likely starting linebacker combo for 2024, just because there's so many areas how he's got to fix. He might just say, well, we got this 3rd-round pick. We got this guy that he's told us he likes how well he played last year. I think it'd be a mistake, but I think it's kind of it's kind of pointing that way.
I don't think that's most likely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, out of the known combinations, maybe it's more likely they sign somebody or draft somebody. But I think there's
out of the you're saying that's more likely than Nick Morrow being in there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that.
Nick Morrow and Ben Van Sumeren.
Okay, sure.
But yeah, I think it's a mistake if you run it back with that group. And number 4 is getting better at that third receiver spot. They've had some disappointments there. Quez, disappointment. Julio did what you would hope he did, but he's also just getting older. Obviously, he's not remotely the player he used to be. He caught 3 touchdowns. I don't think he was disappointing for who he is and what age he is, but OZ, just Zach Pascal, these kind of guys, I just think you have to get better.
Yeah, and it's tricky. Like, how do you do that? You don't want to overspend in free agency. You can try a few lottery tickets, but we know the hit rate isn't great. You can draft someone, but you don't want to draft someone too high because then you don't want to vulture any targets away from AJ and Devontae. So it is a tricky balance to try to strike there.
It is. I think a younger free agent might be the answer there, but it's got to be an upgrade over. And I think part of the reason guys like Pascal and OZ, who had track records of catching 40, 50 balls, I think part of it was just the play calling, the offense. Some was probably Jalen. Just look, if you have Goddard, AJ, Devontae out there, you're going to throw to them. But I just think an offense works better with more weapons. I know Nick's always going to say those 3 guys are going to get the ball, but if you have 4 guys who are good, then you become a little more unpredictable and a little more versatile, and more varieties definitely helps.
What's your sense of if OZ and Quez are both gone, which we kind of expect, who ends up having a better career after this point?
I've always thought Quez needed a change of scenery really, really badly, even before this past season. But I mean, the easy answer is Quez, just because he's got a skill that nobody really has. But I just don't believe in the player. I just don't know. And we've seen guys like Mac Hollins and Nelly who kind of had disappointing ends here. Although Nelly, I don't know, he's kind of hard to really pigeonhole. But I would say OZ actually.
You just talked yourself out of it.
Yeah, it's hard to believe in Quez. But I mean, we've seen him make a lot of big plays, but not recently.
Okay, so you're going OZ?
I'll go OZ. How about you?
I'd probably say Quez.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have a ton of high hopes for either.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Safeties is next, and not 1, but 2. I just think there's a lot of work to do at this position. And, we talked about this last week, like everybody on the team went downhill the second half of the year, almost everybody. And Reed Blankenship was certainly in that group. So how do you evaluate him? Is he the guy we saw at the end of last year, 2022, or in the middle when CJGG got hurt? Is he the guy we saw the first half of this year who was really good? Or is he the guy, sometimes with these undrafted guys, there's a point of diminishing returns and they just, they come back to earth a little bit. I mean, they don't have any safeties that you can really, and I think he'll get the first crack. I think he deserves the first crack at it. But I'm not sold on you can't get better than Reed Blankenship. So, they don't have a lot there. The cupboard's pretty bare. I mean, so I think he's got to kind of just reshape that whole position.
Yeah, and I look at it like free agency is where I would do that. We've seen the Eagles go after free agent safeties before, and it's worked. Like and like the names of the pending free agents at that position, I think you can find the right guy.
Yeah, I agree. And we're going to get to some of those names.
Yeah, in a little bit.
Pretty soon. But yeah, that's next. And then same thing with linebackers. Just kind of remake that position and don't run it back with Zach Cunningham. Don't assume Nakobe can come in and be a productive starter. I don't think you can make that mistake. And I know he hasn't played that much. He's gotten hurt, but I think there's a pretty good chance he's not what they thought.
Okay.
Pretty good chance of that. Not convinced of it, but I think you got to go into this offseason saying we got to remake that position and not assume that Kobe Dean can be one of our guys.
Thought we were talking safeties there.
No, we moved on to linebackers.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that happened.
Well, I said we're going to move on to linebackers.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. What's after linebackers? I feel like we've talked about linebackers quite a bit.
Safeties. No, Bradbury's next. And I know there's kind of a school of thought that you keep Bradbury, you avoid the big cap hit. Maybe try him in the slot or try him at safety, make him a backup.
We're talking the dead money there because he's going to have a cap hit.
Yeah, dead money. Yeah. Which if you June 1st him isn't, then you're going to get hit next year, but the cap's going to be probably like, $280 million and it's less of a hit. But I just don't think you can have him on the team next year. I don't know how you can, cornerbacks, when they start going downhill, they never turn it around. They never go the other way. Generally, when cornerbacks lose it, they've lost it. So we saw that. I don't think a new coach or a new coordinator is enough to get him back on track where he was. I just want to move on without him, and I think it would be a mistake to bring him back.
I do too. Let me play devil's advocate a little bit, though, because in his career, he has kind of been an up and down player.
Yeah.
He's had a good year. He's had a bad year. He's had a good year. Like, could part of their thinking be, well, he had a bad year.
But he's never had a year that bad.
True. But I wonder if part of their thinking could end up being, well, but maybe he'll bounce back, which I think would be a mistake, but could be a part of their thought process.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not convinced they're gonna release him.
And you mentioned the post June 1st thing. Let me just give a quick breakdown of how that works. Basically, if you were to cut a James Bradbury right now, the dead cap figure would be pretty exorbitant. But if you wait until after June 1st to cut him, or if you cut him with a post June 1st designation, you'd have to carry his full cap hit through that date. But then it would basically split a little bit this season, and most of it would push to next season where, like you mentioned, the cap continues to rise. You can only designate 2 players as a post June 1st cut. So he's, to me, a pretty obvious one. Another one that might make sense if they can't restructure is Avonte Maddox, and we'll get into that when we do say or go a little bit later.
Yeah, they're the 2. And I think the number is between $4 and $5 million cap hit if you June 1st. I'm using June 1st as a verb. It's like 7. It'd be like 12 something next year, 4.5 this year. If you do it all now, then it's the entire amount on next year's cap. And there's reasons to do that too. Sometimes it all depends on where you are with the cap. But anyway, I just don't think he should be here. Do you see any value in potentially keeping him?
I think that he wouldn't be a problem. I think with some corners who have been starters, if you ended up having them in a reserve role, would throw a big fuss about it. I don't think he's that type of personality. I don't think it'll be good, but I don't think it will be as bad as some other corners.
Yeah, that part of it doesn't concern me. I mean, he's a pro. But he's also, like, when he's had these up and down years, he's never been in his 30s. He's never had such a good year. I mean, 22 was probably his best year, and last year was his worst year. So
okay.
I mean, he had a really good year with the Giants like 4 years ago. But all right, number 8 is they got a 1 and 2 twos, and one of them's got to be a cornerback. I just think you've really got to. They have a lot of needs. And maybe corner doesn't line up with where they pick at 22 or where they can get to. But there's a lot of good cornerbacks in this draft. And I just think they got to get out of that second round by the second round with one of them.
I have a draft crush.
Oh, who do you got?
Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah.
Toledo.
Yeah.
Been digging on the cornerbacks a little bit this week because I by all accounts, there are several who are first round worthy. He's the guy who's starting to stand out for me, which probably means that we can talk about him now because in a month he'll be out of their range. But yeah, he's the one who's standing out most to me right now.
Yeah, and we're almost in mock draft season, so I'll be looking to see.
Oh, we're in heavy mock draft season.
Yeah. Well, I'm almost in I actually started on mine. I got a good head start on it. Now the Eagles taking a linebacker with every pick. But no, I do think it's, I guess the last time they took a corner in the first couple rounds was Sidney Jones. And then Rasul that same year in the third round, Sidney in the second. But the last time they took one in the first round was Lito, I guess, right? 2002.
Yeah.
So it's been a while. And, even if Bradbury hadn't fallen off the way he did, I think it was important to start, like Slay's 33, Bradbury's 30. It would have been important to start thinking about an elite young corner now, either way.
Yeah, and they kind of did last year with that Keely Ringo pick. I know it was a 4, but really a third-round pick because they traded away a third this year for him.
You see him as a starter?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
I was impressed.
I was too. But I don't think that can change your – and, Eli Ricks did some good things too. But I don't think you can let that change your mind about the importance of getting a corner. Mm-hmm. Number 9 is TE2. Who could potentially become a TE1. I think you have to take this position a little more seriously, and it's not a knock on Jack Stoll or Grant Calcaterra, but they just got to be better at that position. And Goddard has gotten banged up. He's 29 now, and when he's out, you're basically going with, guys who are just kind of there, and I just think they've got to take that position seriously.
Yeah, and he has missed significant time in back-to-back years, Goddard. And we've mentioned it before, but he's now older than Zach Ertz was when the Eagles drafted Dallas Goedert. So, and I think that was a good pick. The Eagles got a good player. I think it was tricky to navigate in the early years of both of them together.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why you wait a little bit longer this time, but it's time now.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. And the last one is, and we touched on this, is just kind of getting the slot figured out. I don't think you can count on Avonte Maddox, and I really admire the way he plays, but he's just always hurt. He's just one of those guys that he can't stay healthy. And, you hope that he would, you hope that he will, but you can't count on him. And you can't go through this thing where you've got, every week you're trying a new guy and you're running Mario Goodrich out there and you're moving Bradbury inside. And then here comes Mekhi Garner and you've got Eli Ricks, and you just can't go through that. You've got to find out, Zach McPherson's coming back, but we don't really know how good he is. So figure that thing out. And that's a really important position. It's like a starting position now. So that's something I think they have to really address. And free agency might be the way to go there too. And maybe you can mix and match and find a guy who can do both, play some safety, play some slot, but Maddox, and I think there's a fair chance he'll be back.
It would take basically a pay cut.
Yeah. But whatever it is, they got to figure that out.
Yeah. And it's a shame because I think we both like the player. When he's healthy, he's really good, but you can't rely on him to be out there. And then we've seen him return from injury and just not be the same guy. Yeah. Which is tricky. Like at the end of last year, he's on the field, but he didn't look like the right player.
And that's a concern with some of these guys that, when the injuries start adding up, they take a cumulative. Boy, I struggle with that word.
Yeah, you do.
They have a combined.
What's your favorite kind of cloud?
Cumulus. They start adding up, they can have a cumulative effect on a player, and we might be seeing that with Avonte. You hope not. He's still a young guy. Was he 28? 18 draft, but I just don't think you can depend on him to be your slot for 17 games or even 12 or 13 games the way it's gone for him lately. He's coming off 2 surgeries. So that's what I have. What am I forgetting? What's the most important thing that you're like, why didn't he mention this?
Oh, I don't know if I came away thinking that. Um, yeah, no, I think you hit most of the major elements.
There's a lot. There's a lot to do.
Yeah, I mean, you can maybe say figure out the backup quarterback position, whether it's Tanner McKee or whoever else. Certainly, like running back is a position where they have to figure out because they have one guy returning under contract.
And I actually wrote a thing about running back, and I deleted it because I started thinking, all I talk about is how running backs are interchangeable. So just bringing a running back
And then
yeah,
obviously we're waiting on Jason Kelsey, but
yeah.
if Kelsey does leave, do you have enough? That's such an important position. Talking about offensive line in general, how did he approach that?
Do you think there's any chance Landon Dickerson's the guy that moves from guard and not Cam Jurgens?
It's an interesting thought because we saw Landon play there very briefly last year.
What was it, like 8 snaps?
Yeah, and we know he has that in his background, but
And Nick even made a point of saying how well he played after that.
Yeah, like he might be a fine center, but he's a Pro Bowl guard.
Yep.
And you have him and Jordan Mailata next to each other. I wouldn't mess with that.
I think it's something to consider. And center is more important than left guard. And he is an elite left guard, but he could probably be an elite center.
He's tall.
Yeah, he is. He's not. How tall is he?
Like 6'5", 6'6".
Is he really?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe too tall, but it's an interesting thought. I've been tossing that around in my head. And then, a lot of that has to do with, Tyler Steen, where's he most comfortable? Is he a starter? Maybe feel like Sue is a starter. I don't know, but
I wouldn't let Steen dictate a lot of that. I think the move would be Cam Jurgens is your center. You draft him to play center. You got to give him the chance to win it. And then you figure out right guard.
I think that's most likely.
Yeah. All right. Next week, Combine, we mentioned it. Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman will speak to reporters at 1:30 and 1:45. So we're excited to hear from them. Real quick, what are some questions these guys have to be asked next week? What do you got?
Howie, what the hell happened? No, I think a lot of these things we just talked about are things I would want to ask. Howie's not going to answer most of the questions, but
there are some moments of honesty at the Combine, though.
I mean, I'd want to know if I'd want to know like how his philosophy of building in the offseason has changed. And we talked about the going with some older veteran guys or just kind of where he felt it went wrong last year. And he touched on that when we talked to him in January, but he's had another month and they were still kind of evaluating then. That's what I want to know is where did it go wrong? What did you do wrong? And how can you avoid it happening again?
This is where if Howie was listening, he turned it off. Not listening to this anymore. What did I do wrong? I put together a Super Bowl roster.
Yeah, and I think Howie understands that. And we talk so much about the players and the coaches, but Howie didn't have a good year. I mean, he didn't. Like one of his first round picks barely played. The other one was really good, but his draft, the Kobe didn't got hurt, but his in-season veterans, like you said, they didn't have much choice in a lot of them, but none of those moves really panned out. They brought in all these guys. There's a chance none of them will be back. It's not like they're scrambling to re-sign Shaq Leonard here. He didn't have a good year, and he's got to be better.
The Shaq Leonard sweepstakes will go down as one of my favorite parts of the 23 season.
Yeah.
Remember that? It was a big deal. Like, is he going to go to the Cowboys? Is he going to go to the Eagles?
Yeah. Yeah, that went bad really fast.
Yeah. For Nick, this is the first time talking to him since the Kellen Moore hire.
Right.
So that's really what I want to talk to Nick about. It's, why was Kellen Moore the right guy, and how the heck is this going to work? I think like he's probably not going to answer directly, but I want to get a sense of what the power structure is going to be on that side of the football. He got the, what do you do here question at the year-end presser, but now that we know all parties involved, at least at the highest level of coaching in the building, like I want to know what the power dynamic looks like. I want to know how much say he has on offense, and if he wants more say on offense. I think a lot of those questions, they might go unanswered at the combine, but I think we'll start to get some hints.
Yeah, those are all good questions. And yeah.
Anything else for those guys?
No, I mean, because they're not going to answer anything. So it's hard to like sit here and come up with these questions that they're not going to answer. I mean, the last time we got anything of substance at the combine was when, and I shouldn't say this when you're about to go out there, but
yeah, when we're from, and we'll have a podcast after we talk to those guys next week and we break down what they say.
When Howie said, we're not going to, when he said Foles won't be back, basically after the 18
There've
season.
been other moments though.
No, there've been some. You're right. Yeah,
there've been quite a few actually. It's harder to hide at the combine because you got to be up there for a set period of time.
But it's only 15 minutes each?
Yeah, 15 minutes is a pretty long time.
Yeah.
And they're separated, which is nice because they can't do their two-man routine together.
Yeah. The little nod and a wink and an inside joke, although they kind of ramped that down in January.
Well, yeah, it's a bad look when your team collapses and you're up there doing a comedy act.
I think a good question for Nick is, what did you do wrong to not be able to turn it around? What would you have done differently? Or what, when you appraise your own performance, where did you go wrong?
Yeah. And I think, that was when we came away from that press conference in January. I think the one area where as a beat core, we kind of missed, and it was tough because I got one question, it's tough to get questions in. And I thought everything that was asked needed to be asked for the most part, but we didn't get into enough of what the heck happened. And that was a miss. We should have gotten more of that. But now maybe they're going to try to take the out of we're looking forward. But I think it is fair to ask again with a little bit of time to breathe from after the season and maybe a fresher perspective. You can kind of take a wider angle view, what happened here and how do you avoid it happening in the future? Yeah.
And that's that. Like I said, I think that's what I would ask first. And they're out when we did kind of touch on the way the season ended in January was, we haven't even gone through that yet. We haven't, haven't done we're just getting through player exit interviews. And so I think that's important to ask definitely next week.
Sure. My favorite part of the combine is it happens right before free agency. So you have every coach, every general manager in the same city at the same restaurants and bars and meetings as all the major player agents in the league. But you're not allowed to talk about players who are pending free agents.
Yeah.
Can't do that.
No, that's true. At least not on the record.
No, well, you're not. I mean, that'd be tampering, Roob.
Oh, yeah. That doesn't happen at the combine.
No tampering at the combine.
Do you know what my favorite combine moment was? Do you remember a player from Lehigh named Will Rackley? Ended up getting drafted in the 4th round. Will Rackley. So he was, I can't remember if he's a Philly guy or was from around Philly, but I wanted to do a story on, he was a pretty good prospect. And let me see where he's drafted, but I wanted to do a story. He did a senior project. He was a photography major, and he did a senior project on on the steel mills taking, and this is before they were like casinos, or they were maybe in the process, but he did this whole photo essay on the steel mills, which are incredible up there. And Will Ratner, just looking them up here.
I got it for you. You can keep talking.
Okay. So yeah, he is from nearby. He's from Georgia, but he did go to Lehigh, and he was drafted in the 3rd round by the Jags. Yeah. Didn't go so well for him. Didn't have he started a couple of years. He was out of the league, but anyway, so I talked to Will. He was at a table and there was nobody there, and I just talked to him for a while about football and about the draft, but also I kind of wanted to write about his photography and how he had a website with all these really cool like black and white shots of the steel mills, and which, if you've been to Bethlehem, and like I covered training camp there for 17 years, and I was just blown away by how massive these places were, these old steel mills. And he was telling me how this one professor, his photography professor was so influential and taught him so much. So I called the guy, and he refused to call me back. I left like 5 messages. I kept calling. I emailed him. Wouldn't call me back. Still pissed at that guy.
So that story never really developed?
You can frame it that way.
Well done. My favorite combine moment was the coin flip in 2017.
Yeah.
Just the funniest moment. And it was fun because Howie actually was fun that day because he played it up and he had fun with it.
Yeah.
The Eagles ended up getting the 14th pick, which was Derek Barnett.
So he didn't have that much fun with it afterwards. Who was the other team? Do you remember?
Colts.
It was Colts. Interesting. Yeah. And we had a lot more access back then. You guys are you in the stadium at all?
Not for drills, no.
Yeah.
It's very funny. Like the combine is very segmented to cover. I tell my friends or, listeners or readers that I'm going to the combine, and they think I'm like going to scout players. The only time I see the players is at podiums, and I don't even see them that much. It's like the combine for reporters is really like you talk to the coach and GM, and then it's a bunch of networking after that.
Yeah. And if there's a local player who's going to be a high pick or a guy from Temple, you get those stories. But yeah, it's a lot of running to guys at bars at 1:30 and getting their number.
It's a funny way to frame that, but yeah. Yeah, it's true. Free agents.
Yeah.
I have a list here. I was asked a good mailbag question that I used on the website on Thursday. Just 3 realistic free agent targets for the Eagles. I'll give you my 3, and then I asked you to do the same to come up with 3 names. So the 3 names I came up with were Cameron Curl, Darnell Mooney, and Josie Jewell. So the safety Cam Curl, who's in a group of a bunch of like really talented and young safeties they could sign. Darnell Mooney, who like Quez Watkins ran a sub 4.40 in that combine back in 2020,
right?
But had more success in the league, but then kind of tapered off. And then Josie Jewell, who has the Vic Fangio connection, linebacker, has been a Mike linebacker in that system, has worn the green dot for Fangio. I think linebacker is a spot where it would make sense for the veteran defensive coordinator to get his guy.
Yeah, and he's the name, I guess, on that list that really clicks for me the most. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it would make a lot of sense to Vic, so we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, and it's tricky at safety. I really think they need to come out of this free agency period with one of these safeties. And you can kind of take your pick, and it's tricky. But Cam Curl, to me, is like realistic because I don't think he's at the highest end of this. But I do think there's a good chance he's been underrated and his best football is still ahead of him.
Yeah, and the word realistic kind of limits what you can do with the answer. But I have a safety. I went with Jordan Fuller, mainly because he's from Bergen County, my hometown, old Tappan. But yeah, he's a young guy, 25, coming off rookie contract, and pretty good cover safety. I think they could. He might be out of their price range. all these guys might be out of their price range, but
there are so many of them.
It's true.
I think that's a good thing. And we've even seen like Tracy Walker, I think, got released. We saw Eddie Jackson get released. And I'm not saying they should go after those guys, but the more saturated the market is, the better it is for the Eagles.
Yep. And then I had Julian Blackman on my list as well. Colts, DB, play safety, can play in the slot. I think he'd be just a good guy to have. He can do a lot of things. He's versatile, more of a line of scrimmage guy than Fuller, obviously. And then I went offense on my other guy. He's probably out of their price range, but Curtis Samuel, I think that kind of guy would be a good. Yeah, I think he'd be a really good fit. Might cost too much. I don't think he's a guy that would upset the apple cart as far as Devontae and AJ. He's just been productive for a lot of years. He's not a star, but he's a solid guy and just consistent.
Yeah, I like that. I think he'd be good with a lot of what Kellen Moore does too. If you get that guy in space, he can make some things happen.
Yeah. And he gets in the end zone. I think he's got like 22 touchdowns. So, so those are my three guys. So we're kind of in lockstep as far as safety is such a. Now, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Blankenship? Would you just say he's a starter? I've seen enough good things out of him, or do you think there should be open competition? It's going to depend who they have in camp, obviously. But
yeah, it's tough to know that until we know what they have.
But are you convinced he could be the guy
for this year? Sure.
Okay.
Just because I don't know if you can completely revamp the position. I think ideally you sign a young free agent this year who you get him on a 3-year deal. He can be the guy going forward. Blankenship maybe is a stopgap, and then you hope Sidney Brown can be a starting caliber player.
Yeah, and it's such a shame he got hurt because who knows when he's going to come back. He'll come back at some point, but you can't count on having him till I don't know. And then if he comes back, say week 5, he won't have had a camp. How long is it going to take him to ramp up? It could be till the middle of the season before he's even ready to play like a full load of snaps. So that makes that whole evaluation at that position. That might be a good question for Howie. Like, how do you approach the safety position knowing Sidney's not going to be back until well into the season?
Yeah, I think that's the answer there is that, happy to have him back when he's back, but we can't
count on him.
All right, let's take a break. We have a lot more on the other side.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store at nissanusa.com today.
Celebrity cook Steve Martorano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martorano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations at Martorano's Prime on Open Table.
Dave, I was going to make one of my free agents the Eagles should go after Steve Nelson just so I could say, Steve Nelson.
I love that you jumped back on just to say that.
I did.
That's fun. All right. Our buddy Derek Gunn on Wednesday put out a tweet, or is it still a tweet? Whatever.
Okay.
He put out a social media post. According to sources, and this is kind of a two-parter here, Jalen's big contract, he was pulled in numerous directions on and off the field, put him under a lot of pressure he didn't handle well. And then the second part of this is Big Dom, when he was suspended, it basically said he controls the emotions for Nick Sirianni on the sideline, and in Dom's absence, Nick got in numerous arguments with players and coaches during games. Let's just go through each part of this, starting with Jalen. Jalen's tough to read for me. It's tough. So that's good insight. I think some of that's to be expected when a player signs a mega deal like that, but you always do wonder how a contract is going to affect any player, but especially a franchise quarterback.
And I love Gunner. I loved working with him. Great guy. But I will say, I don't get how something like that didn't affect him until after the Buffalo game. I mean, he was the MVP favorite week 13. But then week 14, all of a sudden, Dallas.
Although, even before then, I think it was fair to say he wasn't playing up to the level he was the previous season.
That's fair, but I don't think it was that far off. There was a few extra interceptions he shouldn't have thrown. And he was also playing for a QB's coach and an OC who got fired. And he was still the MVP favorite. So I don't see how it didn't affect him until week 13. That would be my response to that. Obviously,
yeah, no, but I think it's possible it did affect him before that.
Maybe.
Yeah. And I think with anything we hear after the season, like the way a season ended like that, people want answers like, well, what the heck happened? What led to this collapse? I don't think it's like one or two things. And, I think it's like a combination of a lot of different elements that led to it. So when you hear about, like, you hear a report like this, like, well, is that the reason they fell off? No, probably not. But like a bunch of little chips leads to a big hole. I don't know if I followed through on that metaphor well, but you know what I'm saying. A bunch of little elements leads to a collapse.
I mean, there was probably 50 reasons for it. I just don't think Jalen's contract was a huge one.
Okay. What do you make of the Big Dom stuff? Obviously, Nick and his emotions is an issue at times.
Yeah. Did you see him getting any fights with players or coaches? There's 70,000 people there watching.
Yeah, I did. It was on the TV.
And what about the year before?
At times.
Yeah. I mean, he is who he is. He's an emotional guy. And I mean, he's the exact same personality as when this team went to the Super Bowl. And yeah, yeah.
You're really not giving credence to it at all. I think there's a little something to this part of it.
Not having Dom out there, I just don't see it.
Yeah. I mean, Nick I don't know if it's not having Dom out there. I think the bigger issue at times is Nick not being able to control his emotions.
I think that's fair. And I think he knows that, but I mean, that's his personality. He's talked about that. And I don't think that's going to change. I don't think it's a problem. I think
at times it's a problem. And because like even Nick has I have it, the press conference in front of me. It was December 26th. And it was actually after the win, the Giants win. And I asked him about, not being too tense. And because it was like, that was the game where they won. And everyone's like, man, they're really not having fun at all. So that was kind of the preface for the question. And then he brought up his sideline demeanor on his own and mentioned he has to be better in a moment like that. So I think he's aware of it. I think it's something he does have to work on.
Yeah, maybe. I guess I'm just skeptical of when the exact same thing was considered a positive in 22 when they went to the Super Bowl. Everyone's like, oh, Nick's emotional. Look how into it he is. Wears his heart on his sleeve. 14-3. Blow out the Giants, blow out the 49ers, come within a play or two of beating the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Emotional Nick in the Coach of the Year conversation. And then 10-1 turns into 11-6, and all of a sudden it's a negative. I'm just skeptical of that.
I get that. I do think it's very different when you're winning games as opposed to when you're losing games. I think sometimes the coach has to be aware of that.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. Like the over-the-top exuberance when you're winning, fine. But when the coach is losing it, when you're falling, I think that can be tricky. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a negative at all times. I think there can be hard coaching. You can have screaming matches at times. But
I mean, Andy Reid got attacked by a tight end in the middle of a game, in the middle of the Super Bowl, and they won. So I just things happen on the sideline, and how many times have we seen it? AJ,
winning changes everything. They win that game. If they lose that game, that's the biggest story of the week.
But the offense started, kicked into gear after that. You're talking about the Chiefs?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we've seen AJ and Jalen yelling. I just think we've seen. I mean, I think the biggest thing that's changed is that there's now like 20 cameras at games. So whenever anything happens on the sideline, we see it and we know about it. We hear about it, and there's no running from it. I didn't think it was a problem with Nick to the point that it affected the team in a negative way this year. I didn't. I'm in the studio, so I don't see what you see on the sideline.
Honestly, you probably see more because the TV is picking up sideline
Maybe
more than I'm seeing it from 200 feet away.
Yeah. I mean, he yells on the sideline. What coach doesn't yell on the sideline? I don't know. I think Nick had a bad year, and there's a lot he's got to work on. I just don't think his emotion it's just who he is. I just don't know. And maybe you're right. Maybe he needs to control it better when they're losing and have a different persona somehow, but he is who he is. Whether he's here or coaching at Mount Union, I just think that's who he's going to be. And he might be coaching at Mount Union soon, but I don't think it's because of that.
Okay. Yeah. I think whenever we get through a season like that, which look, there haven't been many seasons like that. But you're trying to find, well, what went wrong? So you're looking at it through that lens, and that's a tricky way to look at anything after a season.
Yeah.
We have some stay or goes to finish out the series. We'll start with linebacker, then we have corner and safety. Linebacker, we know
a lot of stays there, did we?
Yeah, I mean, look, we know Nakobe's going to be back. We think Ben Van Sumeren will probably be back because he's cost controlled. Don't know what he is. After that, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, there's no one else under contract. I don't know either. I'd be okay if none of them were back.
In this series, you did have Zach Cunningham staying.
That's based on Howie in the presser when he was trying to convince us what a good year he had. That's the only reason I did that. And again, I'm okay with him staying as long as he's not in the role he was at. Now, maybe having a full off season, because I mean, he got here late in a couple weeks, maybe 10 days in a camp. Maybe that would help. Although he was playing better early in the year than late, so that kind of negates that. I don't think he's a bad player. I just don't think he can be your best linebacker. So if you address the position and bring in some reinforcements and some guys that can play and run and hit and tackle, I'm okay if he's in the mix, but he can't be your best linebacker. And he was this year.
I'm kind of with you. Sean Bradley was another one we both had going, but if they re-sign Sean Bradley, give him a chance to show he's healthy, I wouldn't hate that as a special teamer.
No, he's a good special team.
Yeah. All right. How about at cornerback? We both had Bradbury going.
Do we?
Yeah, we did, which I think is right. I don't know how they bring him back, but I feel like we've talked about Bradbury enough, so we don't have to spend a lot of time there. But that's the biggest question at the cornerback spot.
Yeah.
That and Avante, which we were split on. You had Avante staying. I had him going. I think we both agree he's not staying on his current contract, so something has to give.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a tricky one because there's a lot to admire about Avante Maddox. I mean, I love the way he plays, but yeah, certainly not that contract. What's his number? He's like 8. What's he scheduled to make next year? It's a lot.
Or his cap salary, or
his cap.
Well, his base salary is like 7. His cap is 9.7.
Yeah, and dead money's pretty high too. If you cut them without a June 1st designation. The good thing about June 1st is that, and you touched on this, but just to make it clear, the cap's going up like $20 million a year. And I guess you'll find out this weekend or next week at the combine exactly what the unadjusted cap number is going to be. You'll get all the cap.
Yeah.
Isn't it usually combine?
Normally it'll come out around then. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the 2025 cap's going to be like 25 million above that or 20 million above that. So that 17 million is going to be not a much smaller percentage, but a significantly smaller percentage of the 25 cap. as the 24 cap. But I mean, it would be more under the 24 cap. But anyway, and you have to look at whose contract is up next year, and a lot goes into it. But I have him staying. You have him going. Were we the same on all the other corners?
Yeah, and it is nice. Like they have some young talent at corner. They have Eli Ricks and Keely Ringo. We'll see about Isaiah Rodgers and what he can give them. But you feel like, okay, they have some depth there at least. Now they might need to add one more high-end corner, and I think the draft is a good way to do that. But, yeah, you feel pretty good about the depth right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. And that's why, and who knows how long Slay's going to be here. They're not going to cut him, obviously, but after next year, maybe. We'll see. I'm really curious about Isaiah Rodgers. I think he's going to be a lot of fun to watch in camp. Just don't know. I mean, he could be anywhere from – he could be a starter. He could be not on the team. We just don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of possibilities there. And I'm intrigued by him. I'm excited to see him play. I think the fan base might be getting a little too excited about Rodgers. He really had like one good season in the league. It happened in 22, and then he was suspended for an entire year. I don't know what he's going to give them.
Yeah, same. And I think it's just after watching the cornerback play this year, like, oh, got some help on the way. I think there's that sense. But definitely going to be fun to watch him. But, yeah, I think it could go either way, certainly.
At safety, Kevin Byard, we both had going. He's such an easy cut. I mean, I wouldn't spend much time on that.
Yeah.
Cut.
Yep.
Move on. How about the other spots there?
Well, there's not a lot. I mean, obviously Reed's not going anywhere. He's on a rookie undrafted contract. He's as cheap as anybody on the roster. I guess you can redo him now, right? You can.
Well, you wouldn't.
You wouldn't, but you could. After undrafted guys after 2 years, right?
Yeah, but there's really no reason to.
There's no reason to. I'm just thinking out loud here, but
because he's going to be restricted next year,
right? Is there anyone else?
No, not really. I mean, Justin Evans is clearly gone.
I forgot he was still on IR. Another guy who, you don't like to say someone's injury prone, but my goodness, I mean,
if there's ever been anyone injury prone, it's Justin Evans.
He lasted 3.5 games?
Yeah.
I don't even know how he did that. Tristan McCollum, you bring him up, bring him into camp, but we're going through. There's a lot to do here. There's a lot of work to do, especially on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and just by like numbers alone, they don't have safeties. Like they just need some bodies, at least for practice, so that they're gonna have to add safeties.
Yeah, yeah. Any futures safeties? Any guys there that are interesting at all?
No, that's what I'm saying. They don't have bodies right now.
Yeah. Well, after the draft, you might see him sign 5 guys.
Yeah, they're going to need some players.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I have.
So all we know is they need 2 edge rushers, 2 linebackers, 2 safeties, 2 corners.
Well, I mean, I don't think the cupboard's completely bare. They still have some talent on defense, but they do need a lot.
Yeah. Not a lot. I mean, up front, but yeah, a lot of work to do.
Yeah. You got anything else like non-Eagles related?
No. I'm glad that the Sixers starting up again tonight.
Okay.
Looking forward to seeing Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah.
Have you been following this JJ Redick thing with Doc Rivers?
Against my will. Like some of those stories, it's like, I don't want to know all of this, but I do. Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, JJ Redick, like, doesn't he have to call like Bucks games? Like, I'm like, that'd be kind of awkward.
I kind of appreciate the JJ Redick part of it.
I do as well. What about the Pat Bev part of JJ's just
it's funny. Like You thought Pat Beverly was good for content in Philly when he played for the Sixers. He's better after leaving.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But no, I watched a movie last night, The Fugitive. Remember that movie with was that
You're like 30 years behind.
it came out in 92, but it's a great movie.
Have you never watched The Fugitive before?
I think I saw it in the theater when it came out, but it's really good. That one scene where he kind of dives off that sewage drain into the
your recommendation is The Fugitive.
I know.
We're on the cutting edge here.
New music, I can help you out, but new movies, I'm probably a little behind.
Okay. I'm not much better. I've been rewatching The Wire.
Okay.
You probably never watched, but it's a great show. So good.
But I like the band Wire. I'm sure you're not a fan.
I don't know The Wire.
No, just Wire.
Just Wire?
Wire.
I don't know Wire.
Yeah, check them out.
Okay.
You'll definitely hate them.
If I listen to the band Wire, will you watch The Wire?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll do that.
That's a heavier lift for you.
I'm going to see Jason Isbell tomorrow night, so looking forward to that.
Oh, that's fun. All right, let's wrap this up. If you enjoyed the Eagle Eye podcast, you know what to do. Please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, click that like button, subscribe there as well. I'm heading to Indianapolis on Monday, so the next podcast, I will be out there. We will hopefully have already heard from the coach and GM. We'll have a lot to talk about. That's it for Roob. I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye presented by Nissan. We'll talk to you soon.